All right, we do have quorum now, so we will get the second part of the Planning Committee started. This is a formal public meeting to consider application of the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the proposed applications are considered, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board. We have two items before us. The item number 5, draft plan of subdivision for 731 Huron Road, Huron Gardens Inc. Mr. Stevenson, you are going to present first. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I'm here tonight to present to you a plan of subdivision application 30T17201 and zone change application for Huron Gardens Inc. This is a property in Ward 5, municipally addressed as 731 Huron Road. So the property in question here, as you can see, is the final leg of the Huron Village subdivision on the eastern side. The subject area is about 2.6 hectares in size and completes the Huron Village community. From this aerial photo, you can see that the site has been largely cleared, has been pre-graded as it was always anticipated to be developed. The adjacent subdivision, which features all of the stormwater management ponds, is now operational and functional and can accommodate all of the servicing and stormwater considerations for this plan of subdivision. You can see on the north end of this plan, or the top, Rochefort Street is stubbed to the property line, which is the red line, as well as in the bottom left-hand corner, or the southwest corner, you can see that same street is stubbed in there. That's because these lands were always contemplated to be developed. The plan of subdivision before us tonight basically has 4 parts, and I'm going to take you through each one of those. The first being the 18 street fronting townhouses, which are extending on the proposed extension of Rochefort Street there. What's important to note with this design, and something that we had worked with the developer on in consultation with some of the comments we received from the residents, was establishing a streetscape that would provide sufficient on-street parking, as well as a pedestrian route from Block 20 in the bottom left-hand corner, which will be Rochefort Park, to Maitland Street with the minimum amount of vehicle accesses. So you can see this. Earlier you discussed parkland dedication. In this plan we are getting the maximum amount of parkland dedication at 5%, and that is proposed in the corner. And the reason it's located there is it doubles the size of the existing Rochefort Park. And finally, one multiple dwelling block is proposed here, which would be developed through a comprehensive site planning process. The zoning to implement this subdivision is threefold. The green area in the bottom left you can see there is for the park. The orange is R6 zoning, which is found throughout the Huron Village community as well as all of the adjacent properties. And an area 2 that you can see there in pink is R6 zoning with permissions for a little bit of increased height. So in that location along Huron Road, we are recommending that the height be allowed to be increased to 13.6 meters. That's above the 10.5 meters currently permitted by the R6 zoning. We are recommending approval of both the plan of subdivision and the zone change application. As Council is familiar with, the draft plan of subdivision is accompanied by the draft approval conditions. Those contain all of the approval conditions that are required by the city and the region in order to obtain any necessary technical reports or studies in order to implement the plan fully. That is when all of the detailed engineering and design is completed, as well as the servicing design schemes will be finalized. As I mentioned, new vehicle and pedestrian connections will be proposed through the site to the Rochefort Park, as well as the existing transit station stops on Huron Road. The proposed residential uses are compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, as they are found throughout the Huron Village community. This application and my recommendation before you aligns with provincial, regional, and city policies. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gary. So we have a delegation, Brendan Flowing from the GSP Group. And Brendan, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brandon Flewelling from GSP Group. I'm the planning consultant to Huron Gardens, who are the the builder developers of this draft plan of subdivision. I think Mr. Stevenson did a great job of summarizing what this application is all about. And I'll just key on a few things. Really, the draft plan will create 18 street fronting townhouse units, a park block, as Garrett said, as well as a large block for multiple units or multiple dwelling units. They'll be built in the form of stacked townhouses, subject to a full site plan process. The site-specific zone change, as Garrett said, there's an area of site-specific zoning requesting an increase in building height. The reason for that is to allow those units to be built at grade, to allow for full visitable housing. And what that is basically housing that will have a no threshold entryway from the driveway into the front door, larger passageways on the main floor, as well as washroom facilities with larger rooms in general for allowing the use of mobility devices. So the overall building needs to be brought up from a grading perspective, which increases the overall height. So that's the rationale for the increase of the building height along Huron Road. The multiple block is subject to a full site plan process. We're just finalizing our drawings for that. We've had a pre-consultation meeting with city staff to start that process. This really is a rounding out of the existing subdivision and just the connection of the last 2 points of the street. So it's sort of always been contemplated, and this is the last piece to bring it all together. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fernandez, you had keyed in during staff presentation. Do you have questions of delegation or staff?
I do. Both.
Okay, both. Just key back in afterwards. Go ahead.
Yes. So I'm just trying to understand that prior to the draft plan approval, there was some concerns around groundwater table and impervious cover. So how has this been addressed?
Through the chair, we had to go back and look at our engineering design, look at the previous engineering design for the earlier phases of the subdivision, look at the groundwater monitoring reports, and ensure it was an issue of making sure there was adequate separation from the underside of the footings to the groundwater table, and significant or sufficient depth for services and so on. But through the detailed engineering design that we've done to date, and again, we'll have to provide detailed plans as part of our draft plan conditions, it's been found that there is sufficient separation of the groundwater table to what would be the underside of footing.
Okay. Would it be possible, Mr. Stevenson, to go back a couple of slides to the, yeah, that's it, okay. Sorry. So this is going to increase the impervious cover from the original plan, is that correct? So originally it was low-rise residential, and now we're changing it to a higher density, is that correct?
Through the chair, the lands have been designated as low-rise residential when the Huron Community Land Use Plan was created, and that informed the official plan policies that were subsequently applied to this land. What we are doing now is implementing a different low-rise residential zoning. So there are comments that you correctly note about impervious area changing. Basically, the contemplation for this land and the contribution to the existing storm water management pond, there was assumptions made when that pond was built 15 years ago, and what the developer had to do at the request of our engineer was reconfirm their numbers to ensure that the flow rates would be the same. Where there are differences, there would be infiltration galleries required to infiltrate that stormwater, and there are draft approval conditions requiring that detailed analysis, and then all of the associated easements and protections that would be afforded to the city should that avenue be exercised.
Okay, I appreciate the additional information, Mr. Stevenson. Huron Road slopes down away from the picture that we have here. And one of the issues that we've seen with some heavy rainfalls in August of last year was one of them, and there was a tremendous amount of water flowing down Huron Road and then down Battler Road. as we increase the impervious, I'm sorry, that this is probably a staff
So I was gonna
question,
say,
yeah.
if-
I'm going to stop right there because that's not fair to you. I think that was all I had for you, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor Galway-Seelock, it's okay.
Yeah, my only question is with respect to the building height along the homes that are fronting on Maitland. I know during the meeting, residents raised some concern with regards to the height there. Has that been looked at or addressed since that meeting to potentially have just a decreased height for those homes?
Sure. Through the chair, that certainly was a concern at the neighborhood meeting. And we did provide to the city a drawing showing the final elevation of the proposed units versus the existing. And they're actually quite close once the grading operations are taken into consideration. I think the proposed units are roughly half a meter taller than what's there today once they're finally built. And part of that's just the difference in the peaks of the roofs and so on. So they are actually quite close, and we did provide additional information through to staff to address that comment and make sure that was clearly summarized.
So that's even with the grade separation, that the units along Maitland, obviously, even with the grade separation, because it's my understanding that this property is higher than those homes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, once the property is fully graded and to accommodate the proposed development, the finished grades will actually be very similar. Right now, the subject property is quite a bit higher, but a lot of that grade does need to be cut back.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Fernandez, back to you. Sorry, that's all questions of you, Brendan, and now questions of staff. Go ahead.
Right. So I think you knew where I was going in terms of the concerns about the more impervious cover we have, the greater risk we have of flooding. What kind of engineering, stormwater management is going to happen on this site to eliminate the risk of flooding either across the road to that single house at 760, I think it is?
Yes, through the chair. So engineering staff, this was brought to their attention and they did provide comments on it. And the summary, and I'm not an engineer, so I'll give you the planner's summary of what the engineer told me. Right now, it's currently an uncontrolled situation. The lands are impervious, but they haven't been graded or contoured to support the stormwater management scheme that it will ultimately flow through. If you look on page 5.7 of your package, for example, there's places where the grade is about 6 meters higher than where it needs to be, and once all of the grading is complete, the stormwater will be directed towards the appropriate either infiltration galleries or catch basins, and then directed to the stormwater management ponds. So even though the impervious area will increase, the water will be directed to the appropriate treatment and catchment areas, and the overland flow will be eliminated. So it'll be an improved condition despite it being more developed than it currently is.
Okay, so the water will infiltrate on the site and not off the site?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I noted that there was some concern by the residents who live at 760. I know that over the years they've made significant alterations to the front of their property so that they didn't have to view all the changes that were happening across the road. How have we, I mean, it was a little bit difficult to read their letter, and I know it's hard when somebody writes to photocopy it and get it all in there. Has there been something to put these people's concerns to rest?
Through the chair, yes, there has. There's been two developments as we've gone through the finalization of this plan. One, you can see that block 20, the Parkland dedication block, that will be more or less immediately across the street to the person who provided those comments. And we have put direction towards the site plan, and we've advised that there'll be appropriate landscape screening along the Huron Road boundary when that will actually be developed through site plan. So one of the advantages to developing this as a multiple block is that the noise mitigation can be done with building materials and not through a noise wall, and that gives us the opportunity to have a natural landscape buffer all along Huron Road rather than a masonry wall. So there'll actually be the view from across the street will be of a landscape strip.
Okay, but there are driveways, right, that are going to be directly across from this residence, if I understand the orientation.
So you can see here, this is very preliminary, so I wouldn't want you to indicate, or should clarify that this is not for approval, this is a preliminary site plan. All of the vehicle accesses would all be from Rochford Street, and there would be no connection directly to Huron Road. What you do see there is sidewalk connections, and that's because there's currently bus stops on Huron Road.
Right, okay, I appreciate that. And there's a sidewalk connection that makes its way to the multi-use pathway?
That's right. They'll all connect directly to the multi-use pathway, and there'll be a new connection through the park as well.
Okay. And the height that's going to be increasing, it's 3.5 story, and the delegation said that there was going to be significant grading, which would lower those houses. So does that change the outlook of, let's say, units 1 to 6 to the people who live at 760?
The challenge with the grading is that you can see demonstrated on the building on the right. So that building is designed to be visitable. So as Brandon was describing, basically the ground floor needs to be completely barrier-free and at grade. And in order to accommodate that part of the wall is obviously the tallest because you have the full ground floor as well as the floors above it that would be exposed. In this case, those would be along Huron Road, but they're going to be set back further and allowing for that landscape buffer.
Okay. And in terms of transportation, there was no concerns. I mean, there's a number of issues around parking on the streets, and I mean, it's a regular occurrence when we have a change in intensification. How are the traffic's going to flow? But we've addressed all of that. I mean, it looks like it's pretty intensive from this picture in terms of density. This is not changing. This is changing some density, but not as far as it was already there.
Through the chair, that's correct. It's still a low-rise residential product. It's just a townhouse product that has accessible units on the ground floor versus a different low-rise product such as a single detached. So it is similar to other products available in the same neighborhood. And with reference to your comment about transportation, one of the improvements that this design does afford is uninterrupted streetscape along Rochford Street that allows for additional on-street parking. So we know in some of the greenfield areas, some of the challenges with on-street parking is close proximities of driveways. On this side, one whole side of the street has no driveways, so there'll be ample on-street parking uninterrupted.
Okay, thanks very much.
Councillor Galway-Seelock, just activate. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have one question, or I guess it's a question, but it's probably more to do with site plan, but I'm going to ask it anyways. With regards to the park, because we are doubling it in size, I would request that we look at consideration for a play structure in that park. It's currently just a passive. And potentially some sort of, I'm going to call it a protective wall, but a protective barrier to go along there so the kids are protected from, or as best we can, from that high-speed traffic. I know when the previous plan came forward, I was not in support of where the location of the park was being put because it's along a major collector road, and I was hoping it would be more internal to the site. But now that we're doubling it in size, I think this area is just booming with children, and if we can get some sort of active play space there, I think it would be well utilized, but also try and do something that just tries to prevent children from running out on that road, or if a car does happen to veer off, they're protected as best as we can. So I guess that's not specific for you, probably just to pass along as you go through site plan, if that's okay.
Okay, understood.
Thank you. But other than that, I'm prepared to move the recommendation. And you want me to comment?
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Yeah.
you can wait.
So just carrying on with Councillor Galloway Seelock, again, there is a parkland dedication, and there is ask for increased density as part of the zone change. Could we ask the developer to place the play structure? Do we have the capacity to do that?
Yeah, so there's actually draft approval conditions requiring the builder to design and fund and build the park. So it will be built in accordance with our standards. The city does, our operations staff do review and approve that park design, and I will share Councillor Galloway Seelock's comments about requested design with operations staff.
Excellent, that would be good. And then to comments. Go ahead.
I just quickly want to comment that the neighborhood meeting was attended by many residents, and the developer was there, and I think this plan really reflects something that works for the existing residents and is complementary, and while it increases intensification in the area, we see a number of these developments not necessarily shown right on the map, but not too far from it. In fact, they're even larger internal to the Huron Road, and so I think it fits with this community, and I am excited that there will be visitable housing. It'll be, my understanding, the first one in Ward 5, so I'm excited to see that happening as well. And I think, my understanding, there's extremely high demand for them, and so I can appreciate that. And so I just thank staff and the applicant for working with the residents to come up with a plan that works for everybody.
Just a quick comment myself. It seems to be a good design and a connecting of a streetscape, which is necessary, obviously. And the density seems to be in keeping to the current neighborhood. But again, we continue. So this is a comment aside. I'm supportive of the recommendation and this change. Hopefully, the comments from Councillor Galloway Seelock and me asking about the playground would be something that would be considered in ensuring that the neighborhood gets a convergence space, a play space, especially when you got greater density. The other comment I want to add is we see in the outlining neighborhoods in green space development a very broad range of housing stock. And I think that's in keeping with good planning principles, which staff have a clear canvas and they can design it exactly the way theoretically it should be. But sometimes we have, or not sometimes, I think we are more so having an imbalance throughout the city, where seeming to be greater density happening in the southwest or wherever there's green space that can be developed, as opposed to other areas where we are a little bit resistant, sometimes concerned with intensification in built-up neighborhoods. So we have to, I think, have some balance. As we create more density in our outlining areas, we have to carry that forward in ensuring that it's even growth throughout the whole city. So that would be my only comment. With that, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Item number 2, zone change application for 588 600 Queen Street South, Dumblo Holdings Inc. and System Tune Inc. Sorry, bear with me, everyone. Katie, do you want to present? When you're ready.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm here this evening to speak to the recommendation before you with respect to a zone change application at 588 and 600 Queen Street South. The subject lands are located on Queen Street South between Queen and David and between the Iron Horse Trail and the CN Rail Corridor. You can see that the lands are irregularly shaped, and it's made up of 2 separate properties that are part of this parcel that would be combined and made one property for the purposes of this development. So this is an aerial view of the subject lands. They currently contain the former Newgate Bakery and Deli, that's at 600 Queen Street, and at 588 Queen Street it is an auto service repair shop. The two sites are currently designated for mixed use in the mixed use corridor. The Newgate Bakery site is mixed use 1, and the auto repair service is a mixed use 2. And if you're familiar with these lands, you know that they are tired, they're in need of renewal. It's a site that's ready to be redeveloped. They are complicated to develop. They do have a lot of constraints, given that they're adjacent to the rail corridor. They do have the trail as well as the frontage onto the arterial road, so a lot of attention and effort has been placed through the design that I'll put up in a moment to address the pedestrian realm. They're also adjacent to low-rise residential uses, both on the other side of the CN rail corridor and in the adjacent Victoria Park Heritage District. And we're fortunate actually to be working with a developer who's really worked cooperatively with the city over the last year to come up with a design that works to address the site constraints as well as to listen to the community. We had 25 property owners respond to the preliminary circulation and then had a neighborhood information meeting as well, and they've really listened to some of the input that's been received and incorporated into their design. So this is the proposed development concept. They're proposing to develop the site with a mixed-use building having a height of 11 stories or 37.5 meters closest to Queen Street. There's 2 ground floor commercial units, one on each side of a driveway which leads to a parking structure. That's a 1-story structure that is the ground floor in behind the commercial. So those commercial units really work to address the street, to improve the streetscape, as well as to provide a really welcoming entrance onto the Iron Horse Trail. So this is a massing model of the site, and you can see what the proposed building does. And the zoning that's being proposed really is tailored to the development proposal of the applicant, with the 37.5 meter height closest to Queen Street, stepping down to 22 meters, and in this concept that's about a 6-story height, and then stepping down further in the proposal to a 1-story parking structure. The proposed zoning is consistent with what the mixed-use 1 zone has, is a 13.5 meter height, so that's slightly higher than what the proposed parking garage is. The parking garage takes up almost all of the Newgate site, so that the height actually on those lands is not increasing, and that's actually been expanded to lands that previously were allowed to be developed to about 8 stories or 24 meters. So really what we're doing is taking the height from the back and away from the low-rise residential neighborhood and moving it to the front towards the street. We're preserving the 15-meter setback to the rail corridor, which means that there won't be any sensitive uses or residential uses in close proximity to the rail corridor. The owner is also proposing to use a crash wall in lieu of a derailment berm, and CN Rail has some very rigorous criteria for that crash wall so that it meets the same safety standards as a derailment berm would. The reason to use a crash wall is that it takes up a lot less space, and when you're dealing with a really constrained site where it's quite narrow, it makes more sense to make more usable space of the land and to build an engineered crash wall. So staff are of the opinion that the proposed height regulations provide for an appropriate transition from Queen Street to the established residential neighborhood, that the proposed tower complies with the city's tall building statement of expectations and the new urban design guidelines. The crash wall is appropriate to use in lieu of a berm, and a holding provision is also being recommended to ensure that noise is addressed based on the final site design, and that's noise from rail and from the road, and that the site is remediated if that's required, so that an RSC is completed before sensitive uses are permitted. So staff are recommending that the proposed zone change be approved, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. There is a delegation, Greg Romanek is here on behalf of the applicant. Again, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Good evening, Chair Singh, members of Planning Committee, staff, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Greg Romanek. I'm a planner with Stantec Consulting Limited. With me here this evening is my client, Mr. Danik Daniels, the owner of the subject lands, and Mr. Josh Bedard, architect with ABA Architects. I'll make a few brief comments, and then Josh will give you a brief explanation of the design concept for this project. The subject site is challenging. It's long and narrow, squeezed between the Iron Horse Trail and the CN rail line, and it's adjacent to two significant low-density neighborhoods, the Homewood Drive neighborhood and the Victoria Park neighborhood. Over the last 18 months, we've created several different designs to try to find the right fit on this site. We've listened to and considered comments and input from neighbors, and we've worked closely with staff to refine this proposal to find the best fit. We thank the neighbors and staff for their help and their input. If this zoning bylaw amendment is approved, we intend to move immediately into detailed site plan and building design and commence construction as soon as possible. We fully support the recommendations in staff report CSD 17096 and urge Planning Committee's approval of the report. As a professional planner, I believe that this zoning amendment and the type of development it will enable represents good planning and is appropriate for the subject lands for the following reasons. It allows for the viable redevelopment of a tired and decrepit and challenging site with a landmark mixed-use commercial residential project. The requested amendment conforms to and implements provincial, regional, and city policy. The amendment is supported by technical studies, noise, vibration, scope traffic impact study, all of which have been approved by the relevant agencies. The subject lands are within 800 meters and walking distance of downtown Kitchener, the LRT line and the Queen Street station, and other community amenities and services. Transit service is available on Queen Street, and the Iron Horse Trail provides for cycling and walking opportunities. These proposed condominium units will be affordable. They will be targeted at the low end of the market price range. The design concept is sensitive and complementary to the neighborhood. And with that, I'll turn this over to Josh to make a few comments about the design.
Thank you. So as Katie discussed earlier, height and density was a key to the design of this building. We originally approached the design with a slab tower, but quickly realized that it blocks views from the neighboring building. As such, we loaded up as much of the building towards Queen Street to help enliven that commercial facade. We have two commercial units placed at the bottom at grade level, and then with regards to the tower at 11 stories, we've come up with a staggered window pattern, one to serve as a landmark building and a gateway to the Iron Horse Trail. There was much research done into the studies that the City of Kitchener has done on the Iron Horse Trail along with Stantec, so we felt it would be important to enliven that corner. So this is the look you have here. Now also with those staggered windows, that takes into consideration the neighboring Drewlow building at 15 stories to the side. Although we meet the tall buildings guidelines and the tower separation, we felt it would be important to play with the windows and stagger them to avoid having views directly into condominium units. And as well, we're sensitive to the SB 10 regulations for a sustainable building. So that's why you see, rather than curtain walls full of glazing, we want to play with the brick and take it back to kind of the pay homage to the railroad track beside. Oh, and I should also mention, while I have time, there's also a dedicated parkland at the back of the driveway, or the back of the lands, and also that there will be no access off of David Street, so parking would be just along Queen Street.
So, sorry, for clarification, when you said dedicated parkland, like a play structure or green space? Green amenity space, just clarification.
We are required to dedicate parkland at the rate of 1 hectare per 500 dwelling units.
That's been given back to the city?
Well, that's the requirement, Councillor Singh. The amount of space that it is, it's about 0.038 hectares. We're proposing a small dedication at the rear of the property, which would only be a portion of that required dedication, but it would allow for a nodal area at the back end of the property along the Iron Horse Trail. So it would allow for a little seating area. It would protect an existing mature black walnut. We've worked with staff around conceptual design for that area. It would be at the end of David Street, so it would be an enhancement of that part of the Iron Horse Trail.
Good, sorry. I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified for the committee. Councillor Fernandez, you have questions of the delegation?
I do. So I noted that there was a number of concerns around stormwater management and runoff, a couple of comments from the residents. This is a big change in terms of impervious cover. From your other picture that you showed, there's a large parking lot area. Is that to the left of the building? Yes, there. And I mean, that's not a very true, not a very true picture of where the railway line is. It?
The railway line would run along the
where the trees
bottom
are.
left side of that picture.
So where that little gray.
That gray strip would be the track of the line, the rail line.
So my understanding is there's going to be a crash wall there. You're not showing that in this picture?
The crash wall would be incorporated into that one-story parking structure. So the wall that would form the wall of that structure would in fact double as the crash wall.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But if you're going to be, if this is going to be your amenity space, is there going to be some delineation between the track? I know there really isn't much now, but now we're going to have, a vast amount of people living there. How are you going to delineate or safely protect the residents from, getting traveling onto the track?
The residents of this building would not have access through that parking structure to the rail corridor. The rail right-of-way is actually just a little bit to the left of that crash wall and wall of the parking structure. So the wall itself acts as more or less like a gate, or not a gate, a wall or a fence. So that people would not have access to the rail corridor from this development.
But you're showing trees there, so I'm thinking that this is going to be a green space area?
Councillor Fernandez, if you can just allow staff to maybe clarify.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps for clarification, the lands along the rail corridor are not part of this development. That's not the lands that would be dedicated as park. It's actually at the very tail end, right by David Street, where the property, if you remember what the site looked like, comes to a point. Mm-hmm. So part of that triangle, basically to about 25 feet from the back of the parking garage. Beyond that, that would be the lands that would be dedicated, and there would continue to be a barrier, probably a chain link fence between that and the rail corridor. What I think is being shown here is that we're hoping that through the site plan process, we can work with CN to remove that old asphalt from the rail corridor and just make it something nicer than an old asphalt rail corridor. We'll try and work with them through that process.
Okay, thank you for that. Now there was also some comments about greening the site. Just trying to find where that was in terms of the building or the rooftop. Is that something that's still being contemplated?
Through you, Chair Singh, yes, definitely. My client is very interested in trying to incorporate a number of green energy efficient technology. The plan is to use the top of the 6-story portion of the building towards the rear. Both at this point, we're exploring both a patio type of area for residents. We'd also like to look at the potential for rooftop gardens and similar kind of amenities for people to do things there in that sense. Also, we are going to be exploring the idea of solar panel and solar energy collection to feed into the building and perhaps into the grid in some forms. And we've actually got a long list of a number of green technological measures that we want to explore to make the building as efficient as possible, certainly. And there's it's good development business to go down this road these days, so we're definitely on that wavelength.
Okay. The other question I have before my time is that, so this is the entranceway to, Queens Boulevard, that has sort of the historic feeling to it. And this probably speaks more to urban design, but there's a lot of brickwork on there, which would probably lend itself to that feeling of a bit more heritage or older feeling than if it was all glass and metal. What other features are you hoping to incorporate to continue that feeling of entering the heritage area of Queen Boulevard?
I'm going to let Josh speak to that, if I may.
Through the chair, basically we're looking at bricks, as you've mentioned, so into that historical era of the turn of the century. Also, as you'll see on this, sorry. Yeah, this isn't working. If you'll notice the mullions in that, with the framing of the glazing, it's like a dark charcoal, which would also have been used in that century, not like the white or the anodized aluminum that you see now. And trying to get that to work on those two brick masses that you're seeing to break up the volume. And then it would also be addressing our age, and Kitchener is kind of the tech hub, so you would see certain instances. I could think of the Google building, for instance, so how you see some of the unique glazing they have. We've proposed round glazing at the base, and then also at the mid-level where we're breaking up with the terracing, just to kind of address both periods, because we realize it's a gateway into the city, as well as a gateway into Queens Boulevard, and just the idea that it's right beside it's pinched between the Iron Horse Trail and the current CN rail track.
Okay, I'm out of time, but I do have a few more questions.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a couple of quick questions. The residents were concerned about traffic into the neighbourhood. My understanding of that is that there is no exit, Mr. Romanek, to David Street, so the traffic's going to come out onto Park. Am I correct?
Yes, through you, Chair Singh, that's absolutely correct, yes.
Okay. And on the ground floor, you've got a mix of retail. We really miss the Nougat restaurant. A restaurant is included in those uses?
Certainly, the restaurant use is permitted, and I know in all of our conversations we've definitely earmarked that as a preferred use. Of course, it depends on being able to come to an appropriate business arrangement, but definitely that's one of our key goals, and particularly on the northeast corner, at the corner of Queen and the Iron Horse Trail, would be our first preferred location for that kind of use.
Right. Okay.
We've even spoken to the idea of actually communicating with the Nougat Bakery people again, if there could be some possibility. You never know until you talk, but my client Danik has relationship with them because they were on the site while he owned it. So we definitely would like to see that kind of use, and the kinds of uses that we're interested in are the kinds of uses that would bring street life and sort of amenity to people living both in the building and in the area.
Right. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. I had some comments when we get to that.
Okay, all right. Please key in afterwards. Councillor Jansky.
Mr. Romanek, just following up on Councillor Fernandez's questioning on the setback from the railway line to the barrier required of the wall of the garage, and it was 15 meters. Could you clarify, is it 15 meters from the setback of the railway line, or 15 meters back from the setback of the railway right-of-way line?
Through you, Chair Singh, the 15-meter setback is to the residential or sensitive use of the site. So from the edge of the rail line, there is a 15-meter setback to that taller residential portion of the building. The parking structure is set back from the rail line only a short distance. Sorry, I don't know the precise number. It's about 1.5 meters, 2 meters to the parking structure and the crash wall being the wall that forms the edge of the parking structure.
So that's where the 15-meter right-of-way distance is?
Well, from the edge of the property, which, as I said, was approximately 1.5 meters off the structure of the parking structure, then you get into the rail right-of-way, and I'm not sure if, I don't know the precise width of the rail right-of-way, but I would estimate it at being from the edge of our property to the rail tracks, probably in the order of about 15 meters. So you probably have roughly 15 meters on both sides, 12 to 15 meters on both sides of the tracks.
Well, I'm reading here in the staff report that the special regulation provision requires that the sensitive uses be located 15 meters from the rail right-of-way. Yet, when I look at the staff's presentation, if they could put it up, if you can, one of the first signs that they had was showing where the property lines are. Go back. There's the site plan. Okay. Is that a true, accurate description of the property line of the subject properties?
Yes, generally, and you'll note that on the left side, outside of the yellow property line, there is a hard surfaced area, and there are vehicles parked there. And historically, CN has allowed that by lease. But, and I'll let staff speak to this, I know that through this planning exercise, the city would like to see that use discontinued.
So that looks like it's about 15 meters from the actual railway track itself to the property line, where those cars are parked, to the front of the cars.
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
and I'm assuming where that property line is where your garage barrier would be, roughly right there. Yet when I read the report and it says it should be 15 meters from the right-of-way, then you really got to talk another 15 meters on top of that, according to what's written here.
Well, perhaps I should let staff speak to that as well, but as I note, the requirement, as I understand it in the Kitchener bylaw, is that there's a 15-meter setback from the property line, the edge of the rail right-of-way, the property line,
That's back
to residential uses. Other types of non-residential uses are allowed within that 15 meters and closer to the property line.
Let's just have staff clarify this.
Maybe staff can comment?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The way Greg's described it is correct. We do have a regulation in our zoning bylaw that says sensitive uses, and that's residential uses, dwelling units, that sort of thing, are required to be set back 15 meters from the property line. A parking garage is not considered a sensitive use, and the retail or commercial space is also not considered a sensitive use. So those uses are permitted to be within that 15-meter setback as is being proposed by this developer. All of the residential component of this building is set back respecting that 15-meter setback requirement.
So really the residential portion of the units themselves is set back 15 meters from that property line, which happens to be more or less coincidental to the crash wall line of the garage.
Just keep your mic.
Just confirming that.
Yes, so the crash wall is at the property line, and then there's 15 meters, and then the residential units can start.
Okay. Because the way I read this, and the way some comments have been coming back and forth, seem to be talking about two different dimensions and understanding where the use of the residential component is. So you're actually talking the use being the building as opposed to the zoning. Because the zoning goes right to the middle of the railway right line.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. That's how our zoning bylaw typically goes. The zoning line always goes to the center line of an adjacent right-of-way, so it'll go to the center of Queen Street, to the center of the Iron Horse Trail, to the center of David, and to the center of the rail corridor.
So it's just a matter of talking, we're talking the right apples in terms of our discussion. That's what I was just trying to confirm.
Okay, Councillor
Okay.
Czarnecki, I'm showing a lot of latitude with the time, but we want to keep a watch of the clock as well. Councillor Fernandez? You're done. Councillor Fernandez?
Sorry. Yeah, so a couple more questions related to the impact on the Iron Horse Trail. So my understanding is that the trees that I see right now from this aerial view that are just to the left of the existing building will all be gone? So where the Queen's Tire is, there's a bank of trees there. Are they all going to be removed? And how much will be removed towards the back of the property?
Through you, Councillor Singh, just to clarify the question, when you reference the trees, are you speaking on the right side of the property along the Iron Horse Trail?
Correct.
Most of those trees that you would see there would be located on the Iron Horse Trail and not on the subject property that we're working on. There are a few right along the edge of the property. They may be on the property boundary or just off, say, on the Iron Horse Trail. We will be doing, as part of the site plan process, a tree management plan, which would assess both any trees remaining on site, of which I can tell you that there really are none of any really very good quality, but we will assess those. We would also assess the development impact on any trees just beyond the site as well. We've already visited the site with staff from planning and design, and we've noted these trees, and we acknowledge we'll have to do a tree management plan.
And I appreciate that, because that entrance to the Iron Horse Trail is a nice resting spot. There's a fix-it station there, and a lot of people like to stop there, and so to have a little bit of that canopy is important. Hopefully you'll be able to continue preserving that. You did say that there was, and from the other picture, that the cars will be parking on Queen Street and entering from Queen Street? Because I see a car
we don't anticipate any parking along Queen Street, but the entranceway into the parking for the building is in the middle there. It's that dark opening. The reason it's located there is it has to be the entrance, the closest part of the entranceway has to be 30 meters from the rail tracks to meet Railway Canada guidelines.
And I have no problem with that. I just thought I heard you saying parking on Queen Street, and I'm thinking that's a pretty narrow piece in there, and I'm trying to figure out how you to accommodate parking. If there's a little restaurant there, people might want to pop in and get a coffee and then go out again, but I certainly wouldn't want to see that. There was some comments around that this is a new developer to the city, and certainly I think we welcome new developers to the city because they bring new and fresh ideas. So I'm going to extend a welcome to you. It's unfortunate that people feel that just because you're not from the city that you don't have great ideas. And just going back to my question around the stormwater management pond, or stormwater management features, you had said you're looking at as many green options as possible, including some rooftop gardens and the amenity space at the very back. Is there any other because now we're going to, again, a more impervious cover than what was existing there?
We had undertaken a functional servicing report as required, and part of that addresses stormwater management. The site will have challenges in as much as you're correct, there is a fair amount of impervious cover. So we will have to deal with and control stormwater appropriately so that fortunately the site's very flat. There's not as much of an issue about running off into different directions, but it'll have to be controlled. How and if we can incorporate any forms of infiltration, water catchment or reuse, that will come more clear as we do more detailed building and site design.
Right, because you still have to go through a more detailed design. This is really more conceptual at this time.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And those are all the questions of the from committee anyways. I have a couple. The crash wall from the property line, what's a setback from that?
Just bear with me. Josh, you don't have a site plan, do you?
No, Councillor Janeski, you were asking separation from the actual tracks. I'm asking from the property line. What's the setback of the build?
Can we pull the site plan up? I think there's a reference drawing.
It's okay. Is it the appropriate, what is it? We
It's
require 5 meters?
approximately a
or,
meter and a half, Chair Singh.
The smallest dimension I'm seeing here is 1.3 meters. The smallest dimension I'm seeing is 1.349 meters between the property line and the crash wall. It's a curved line, so that's the nearest.
Which is a little over 5 feet.
It's almost 5 feet.
Okay, all right. That's all I had. So thank you, sir. That's all the
Okay,
questions.
thank you.
There's a few that have rung in. Is that comments or questions of staff? Okay. Councillor Fernandez? Oh, sorry, Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'd be prepared to move this. It's in my ward. But I did want to, first of all, compliment the owner through Mr. Romanek, who I've worked with on this project, compliment them for working closely and very effectively with the neighborhood. And they're a very picky councillor. I'm pleased with the architecture in this project. I think it looks great. And it's a fantastic entrance to the Iron Horse Trail off of Queen. It cleans up a very, very ugly entrance to the trail from what used to be there, which was abandoned vehicles and all kinds of junk. And in my opinion, a quite ugly Drew Low building on the other side of the trail, but that's neither here or there. This development is going to be a short, probably about a 10-minute walk to the downtown LRT stations. The fact that we don't have residents, dozens of residents here tonight, shows how well they have managed to work, combined with planners, work with neighbours ahead of this coming to us. Neighbours have expressed concern about the fact the building went up to 11 stories on Queen, but personally I've always liked the 11-story on Queen going down to 6 and then down to 4 to fit well with some low-rise apartments in the heritage area behind on David Street. And so I think that works as well. I'm satisfied this is going to be a very attractive building, and I would compliment the architect on the work he's put into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to certainly support the recommendation before us. I'm very excited about this development. This is certainly a site that has been underutilized for many, many years, and I think many of us had hoped that it might have seen development earlier on. I think, considering the complexity of the site, the proximity to both the trail and the railway and so on, it's made great use of the property and will be a welcome addition to this part of the Victoria Park neighborhood. So thank you, and look forward to seeing it come to fruition in the coming months.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Wanted to ask staff about the impact of construction and how it will affect the trail. Pardon? Excuse me. Councillor Shannon, did you have a question?
I thought we were comments.
No, I don't think so.
We
They made comments, but I hadn't had a chance to ask questions of staff.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So if you want a clarification beforehand, that's okay. Go ahead.
So through you, through the construction period, I would anticipate that there'll be construction hoarding and protection between the property and the trail. I would not anticipate that there would be any impacts on the trail. If there was anything, it might be for a short period of time. I know that the trail is also going to be reconstructed this spring, and so there will maybe some disruption with that. I may look to the applicant to indicate whether they would expect any impact or any construction encroachments.
Through you, Chair Singh, to be fair, I mean, the building is close to the property line. We have not undertaken detailed building design and don't know precise construction methods yet. But, I mean, typically, property owners are asked to try to stay on their own property and not impact adjacent lands. And will be a delicate management question, especially with the upgrading of the Iron Horse Trail in this area. Perhaps as we start, and we do plan to start immediately following adoption of a bylaw to do the building design, we can interact with staff and working on the Iron Horse Trail and try to potentially even coordinate efforts. But we would do our utmost, obviously, to respect the Iron Horse Trail, and I mean, it's an amenity for everyone, including our project. So.
Thank you, and I appreciate the clarification, because I wanted to make sure that my comments, that I wasn't, criticizing you for something before I even knew the answer to the question. It is, with the changes and the upgrading to the Iron Horse Trail, I think it's important that we're not trying to do that work while you guys are trying to do construction. I think that the Iron Horse Trail users will certainly be understanding that there will be times when it may not be accessible because of what we're doing and because of what you're doing, and I'm sure you'll minimize that. It's good to see a site that is a bit derelict to be changed into something that is usable and livable and is accessible to the Iron Horse Trail, so that people will, it's close to the hospital, it's the gateway into the city from Queen Street, so I think that there's a lot of positives happening on this site, and I certainly applaud the developer and yourselves for working with the neighborhood and working with the ward councillor on that, because I think whenever we see this kind of development, I know that there's concerns around microclimate, and wind tunneling, but I know those will all be addressed through the site plan process. So I'm happy to see this change on this particular location, and you've certainly tried to squeeze something into a very untypical site, make it look something unique.
Thank you for your comments and for all of Council's comments on the positive side, and we're listening to all the comments. We're excited about the project. We really are.
Before you go, Greg, further to clarification on Councillor Fernandez's question, and I think it's a good question asked. I'm assuming when the construction does happen, the right construction fencing with appropriate materials that does the proper separation from the trail would be used?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just more of a comment more than anything else. There's no one else for comments, so I'll quickly make mine. This is a good design, and obviously it's already been said that the site itself, the way it's set, it has certain constraints, and obviously it's been a derelict site for a long time, and remediation of it will be welcomed by the neighborhood. This is the type of development that we want to attract. It's good development. It, from what I can see on screen, uses the right type of materials. And of course the amenities that are included in seem to be in keeping with what we are hoping developers bring forward. The only thing I challenge the developer is, apart from the zone change application, I hope that this project will come to fruition as quickly as possible. In my opinion, I think the market is there, especially in this neighborhood, that can very much absorb a product like this very quickly, as we've seen some proposals, very close proximity, that are going forward very quickly as well. So wishing you good luck. And with that, it's been moved by Councillor Etherington. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. So that was the last item. I see a few other people in the gallery. Was there any other item that you were here for? Okay. You're okay? All right, good. Sure. Have you already talked to the clerk yet, or no? Okay, well, come forward to the podium. That's okay.
Good evening. My name is Mohad Amir Jani.
Sorry, what's this regarding beforehand?
I'm just saying a comment about the project.
Oh, about this project.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, of course.
Okay.
You have 5 minutes.
Sure.
We've already, now mind you, we have already taken a vote from the committee, but that's okay.
Okay.
This vote is from the committee, which goes on to council, which is, again, makeup of members of council that you see around the horseshoe right now. It just is ratified in council, and then finally, that's the final approval, and that will be, I guess, the upcoming council meeting. So your comment will still be received as we make our decision on council meeting. Okay. Go ahead.
I currently run the tire shop on Queen Street, 588 Queen Street. I came to inform you that I have received many positive remarks from the neighborhood. The comments were very positive and centered around the cleaning up of the site, and they support a lot of the development. Sorry.
It's okay.
Another thing that I have to say, my family business is a catering business, and I'm a qualified chef, and I would like to open up a restaurant on the premises. Since there's no restaurants with 500 meters of that area, I think it would be a very good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. And your comments help to inform the committee that we made the right decision. So thank you for coming forward. With that, meeting adjourned. Thank you.